Talk with Dr. D.Z. Cofield. The show represents captivating conversations and insightful information to encourage and inspire you with all you need to become the best you can possibly be. And now, your host for Real World, Real Talk, Dr. D.Z. Cofield.
Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. D.Z. Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more, your community station, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial here in the lovely city of Houston, Texas, and KTSUradio.com anywhere in the world. And of course, we want to send a shout out to all of those who are listening via the app. If you do not have the app, you can text the word app, A-P-P, to 713-313-4354. Follow the prompts, and you can download the app. And of course, don't forget, membership at KTSU is 365 days a year. Don't wait until it's time for the spring or fall membership campaign. You can join anytime you are inspired. Because remember, there is no public radio without the public, and that's you. And we want to thank all of our supporters who help KTSU be the station it is, and those of you who are helping the station to become even greater. Now, let me say to everybody, happy Memorial Day weekend. This weekend is a powerful weekend for so many people. It was originally called Decoration Day, from the early tradition of decorating graves with flowers, wreaths, and flags, and remembering loved ones who passed away in general. And there's still a tradition of many families to go and remember their loved ones. But Memorial Day has shifted, and it really started, interestingly enough, around 1868, when General John Logan of the Grand Army of the Republic, an organization of former Union sailors and soldiers, decided to take a day to remember those who died in service to our country. During the first national commemoration, former Union General and sitting Ohio Congressman James Garfield made a speech at Arlington National Cemetery, after which 5,000 participants helped to decorate the graves of more than 20,000 Union and Confederate soldiers who were buried there. We're going to talk today about a powerful, powerful legislative act that has taken place to help veterans get that designation, get that rating that they need in order to get the help and service that they need. So if you know a veteran, whether they've served in the Korean War or Vietnam War, if you know a family member who is still alive, who served in World War II, or going back into World War I, if they've never gotten that rating, they've never gotten services like they need to, you want to have them tune in. You want to get a pad and a piece of paper. You want to take notes, because today promises to be an informative and life-changing show. Now, just a couple of housekeeping matters before we get started. If you'd like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on IG, Instagram at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Facebook at DZ Cofield, and you can follow me on Twitter at, you guessed it, DZ Cofield. So as I stated, Memorial Day is a day to respect and remember those who have died in service to our country. But here's the question. What are we going to do to honor and take care of those veterans who are still alive? There's been a lot of controversy around this in our country. You know, over the past 10 years, I've done a number of shows around veterans and veterans issues. And the truth of the matter is, and I think most of us would agree, our veterans are not treated the way many of us think they should be treated for putting their lives on the line. However, because of politics and other acts, things just haven't been done. Now there's a major shift, a major change taking place. I want to welcome to Real World, Real Talk tonight, Cornelius Blackshear. He's a transition patient advocate. He's one of the newest members of the Michael E. DeBakey VA Medical Center, post 9/11 Military 2 VA clinic. This program is part of the social work service, and more than 50% of the team members are veterans. Cornelius Blackshear is a native of Houston, a graduate of John H. Reagan Senior High School, which is currently now known as Heights High School. There, he joined the Army ROTC program and served as the Cadet Battalion Commander. He served for 10 years in the military at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and Fort Hood, Texas. He deployed to Honduras, Riyadh, Kuwait, Bahrain, Germany, and the Persian Gulf, while in the U.S. Army Reserves and Individual Ready Reserves. Prior to coming to Michael E. DeBakey VA Medical Center, Cornelius worked at the University of Texas Health Science Center, Texas Department of Health and Human Services as a community-based liaison, and the United Way of Greater Houston with their military and veterans program, Mission United. He has also served on several local and statewide boards, including the Adult Protective Services Region 6 Board, Texas Alliance of Information and Referral Services Board, Prairie View A&M ROTC Alumni Board, and the City of Houston's Mayor's Commission Against Gun Violence. Let's welcome to Real World, Real Talk, Mr. Cornelius. And man, I'm just grateful to have this brother with us, Cornelius Blackshear. Brother Cornelius, how you doing, sir?
Good afternoon, Dr. Cofield. How are you doing today, sir?
Man, I'm just honored. First of all, let me take this opportunity to join all of those of us who benefit from the sacrifice that you made to thank you for your service to our country, and looking forward to hearing from you today about what's happening with veterans. Can you talk just a little bit about what you do as a transition patient advocate? Because we've had a number of shows here where we've identified some of the challenges that veterans are having, and many veterans feeling like their service has not been appreciated. They're honored on Memorial Day, they're honored on Veterans Day, but they don't feel the love the other 363 days out of the year. Talk about what you do and why you do it as a veteran.
Thank you, sir. So as I stated earlier, my family has a legacy of serving in the military, and transitioning from my role in the nonprofit sector and moving over to the VA has allowed me to continue serving that family legacy. As a transition patient advocate in the M2 VA post 9/11 clinic, our role is basically to touch every veteran that's coming to the greater Houston area that's coming out of the military. And with that, not only do we engage the veterans, we ensure to enroll them into VA healthcare so that those new veterans that are coming off of active duty, whether they're retiring or they have a medical injury that's causing them to come off of active duty, our role is to engage them, enroll them in the VA, and then empower them to receive those benefits that you were talking about earlier. Our team is part of the VA social work program. We have a program manager, a team lead, additional TPAs, and then social workers that provide case management services, benefit updates, counseling, mental health services, primary care, anything that that veteran and that family needs to transition off of active duty to the Houston area. That's our role in supporting those vets.
So I'm not sure what was the impetus behind the PACT Act, but I want you to talk first about what it is and then what it helps to provide to veterans. I don't think there's any question in the last 10 years, there's been so much more awareness and discussion around mental health and the challenges around mental health. A lot of people, I remember Vietnam veterans coming back and, just fighting to get ratings around Agent Orange and, were they in the right place, and different battles, and different wars being ranked differently. What is the PACT Act doing to help bring equity and bring treatment and resources to veterans?
I echo what you stated earlier. The PACT Act is a game changer for veterans that served both during Vietnam, Korea, and those that have served in our recent conflicts. I want to read a couple of things here because I want to get this out to the audience as it is stated. The PACT Act is expected to be one of the largest expansions of veterans benefit and health care in the VA's history and could impact up to several million veterans. I want to read what the PACT Act allows. The PACT Act defines the term toxic exposure, but as a general matter, there are several other exposures that veterans face while they were in service. So we talk about those chemical exposures, herbicides, and you talked about Agent Orange with our Vietnam era vets. It allows those veterans now to come in and be screened and then also apply for compensation and benefits for those services. There are also air pollutants that are part of the PACT Act toxic exposure screening, burn pits, some of the oil fires that veterans have dealt with in some of the wars in the Gulf. There are also occupational hazards. There are veterans that serve in these hazardous areas as a part of their day-to-day task and missions. So again, they can also be screened and apply for benefits there. Radiation for our naval folks and those folks that work around those type of nuclear weapons and testings, they are also eligible to apply for benefits under the PACT Act. And then finally, any warfare agents, again, go back to Agent Orange and any other chemicals that veterans may have come into contact with, whether they be friendly fire or enemy fire. Those are things that the PACT Act has opened up to those veterans that may have not received benefits in the past.
So one of the things that is talked about is ensuring that veteran-centric approach is taken to timely and efficient delivery of health care and benefits. And you talked a little bit offline about the number of veterans in the midst of fighting for rating and fighting for services died without receiving those services. Talk about why the PACT Act is so important around that and getting veterans the services that they need.
Correct. So there has always been a benefit for survivors' benefits. However, because veterans who served during those conflicts did not receive compensation or those conditions were not rated by the Veterans Administration, the PACT Act now turns that into, even if a veteran has passed, if their health condition, if their service time can be linked to their toxic exposure while in the military, that family of that surviving family member can now go back to the Veterans Administration and apply for that compensation benefit. So if there's a widow of a veteran, or if there's an older veteran, as we mentioned, that has never applied for benefit, but is dealing with some of these challenges because of their time in service, again, they can be screened by their doctor for toxic exposure and then go back and apply for that compensation piece. So again, we talked about those numbers. I do have a few numbers here that I'd like to share with you. Right now in the state of Texas, there are 1,543,168 veterans in the state of Texas. That's about 8.3% of all veterans living in Texas. The veterans enrolled in VA healthcare, there's 700,071 176 veterans. That's about 9.2% of the veterans enrolled in Texas. There's about 52,427 PACT Act claims being filed since August of 22, since this legislation passed. And there are about 116,380 non-PACT Act related claims that have been filed. So our mission right now at the VA, number one, is to engage our veterans where they are in the community by going out and hosting events, by screening the veterans, by talking to the active duty and reserve components. We're also going out to our local VFWs, which have large populations of both Vietnam and Korea era veterans, so that we can engage them where they are, go ahead and enroll them into the program, get them screened, and then allow them to apply for those compensations.
That's amazing. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and we're in the studio with Cornelius Blackshear, who is with the Veterans Administration, talking about the PACT Act, talking about veterans now getting an opportunity to receive the services and support that they need that hasn't happened prior to this. Mr. Blackshear, what do you think, looking at the PACT Act, was the impetus behind this taking place and taking place now?
I noticed when we talk about services to our World War I and World War II vets, later in life, there are a lot of health conditions that were not recognized by the VA, and they brought those conditions on, which a lot of times led to a loss of life. So I'm glad as an American and as a military veteran that our government, the VAs, that our legislative folks are coming on board to offer assistance and benefits and services to these veterans that have served this country. So again, you said it earlier, this is really a game changer for those vets that have been out there. The VA hospital has both primary care, mental health services, and then specialty care that those veterans, once they receive their compensation ratings, that they will be eligible for at no cost or a small copay, depending on the veteran's rating as well as their income. So you can look at our women's clinic that we have now at the Michael E. DeBakey VA Medical Center. We have a post-deployment clinic, which I work out of, that are working with our newly transitioning veterans. There's home-based primary care services. And then there's a pharmacy that's on campus where the veteran can either come in and pick up their medication, or they can have them mailed out to their home. Again, most of these services that the veterans have earned are at no cost. We talk about veteran suicide all the time, so we lead up to Memorial Day, and that number is still staggering, but the work that's being put in by the mental health team and the suicide prevention team and all of the evidence-based counseling that's going on. And again, there's a laundry list of also all of the different specialty programs, from cardiology to dental to palliative care, transplants. All of those things are going on at the VA. So for veterans that have not engaged the VA in the last, 2, 5, 10 years, we're encouraging them. We're coming out to the community and sharing, as we could relate to say the good news, that there are benefits there that veterans are now eligible for.
Let's talk a little bit about the people who work at the VA. Because I know a lot of times when people are sick, when they're hurting, when they don't feel like they are receiving their just rewards, they can take it out on the people who are up front. But you have a tremendous team of people, many of whom are former veterans who are serving at the VA. I want you to just take a moment, if you will, just to give them a shout out, because I think it's important for us to recognize not just those who are veterans, but those who are serving our veterans and some who are doing double duty.
Most definitely. I want to start with the directors at the VA, both the hospital, the benefits administration, and the cemetery administration. Those representatives have been so, engaging of veterans and hosting town halls and giving veterans and VA staff opportunities to go out to the community to do this outreach and reach out to folks. The social work department, the suicide prevention, even the folks in the canteen and the kitchen that service the veterans as they're walking through the hospital. There's a mission for us that if we see a veteran walking around in the VA and they look lost or unattended, guess what? Stop what you're doing. Address that veteran, help them get to that space and place, to that appointment, or help them identify where they need to be. The hospital's kind of color-coded, similar to what we did in the military, red, green, purple, blue. But even in that, when a veteran drives up on campus and finds a parking space and they get into the hospital, we want them to feel that they are appreciated. And you talked about getting that love the other days of the year. That's the thing that the VA staff, the directors, and I'll go back to my program manager and team lead, and our team, again, we have each other's back. We go above and beyond to continue to serve. And then there are also 11 community-based clinics that are here in the greater Houston area. So if a veteran can't get to that local VA, those community-based clinics offer some of the same services that the veteran can receive right there where they live.
Let's go back just for a minute and talk about the PACT Act. For those of you who are just tuning in or may not be aware of it, the full name of the law is the Sergeant First Class Health Robinson Honoring Our Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxics, the PACT Act. And it brings about several changes, including expanding and extending eligibility for VA healthcare for veterans with toxic exposures and veterans of the Vietnam era, Gulf War era, and post 9/11 era, adds more than 20 new presumptive conditions for burn pits and other toxic exposures, adds more presumptive exposure locations for Agent Orange and radiation, requires the VA to provide a toxic exposure screening to every veteran enrolled in VA healthcare, helps improve research, staff education, and treatment related to toxic exposures. And veterans and survivors can file benefit claims now to apply for PACT Act related benefits. I have to just ask you, if you can, just to talk a little bit more about that, because when we think about benefits, we think about the veterans who are alive, but you're talking about veterans and survivors, and you said some family members can file for benefits as well,
That's correct.
even retroactively.
That is
This
correct.
can take place.
That is correct. So survivors benefits through the VA, again, for those veterans that um, upon their time of death, one of these presumptive conditions was the cause of death, the family can go back and file for those survivors benefits. Most of the times that's going to go to the spouse, but it also depends on, the service, the time, and things along that nature as far as them engaging the VA. But this is my mantra, and we've talked about this at the VA. Have them register, have them enroll, have them screen. They can go through and do the screening, and now they're doing screenings up to every 2 to 5 years through the VA. So whether you're using your local community provider or you're coming to the VA to get those services done, those doors are wide open. We have seen an uptick in the number of veterans that are coming to the VA around toxic exposure and toxic exposure screening. And of course, the Veterans Benefit Administration has seen an uptick in the number of claims that have been filed as well. But it is imperative that those veterans and those surviving family members go and apply for those benefits.
And I think it's important for you to emphasize as well to our listeners that if a person applied and was denied previously, the PACT Act now gives them another opportunity to get that approval done. Is that correct?
That is correct. There are those, and I mentioned this at a presentation earlier, when you get a rating from the VA, even if it is a 0% rating, that does not mean that the issue or the condition is not there. It means based on the VA standard for compensation, you don't rate any higher than that 0%. But if you've gotten a denial letter from the VA before for some of the conditions that are now covered under the PACT Act, you need to come back in and reapply and apply for those benefits. That is correct. That is again a game changer when you talk about veterans from the Vietnam era, the Korea era, and then these veterans that are served in the Gulf War.
For those of you who are listening, this is Real World, Real Talk. Dr. DZ Cofield with Mr. Cornelius Blackshear of the Veterans Administration. And I want to encourage you to call a veteran now. Call a veteran's family member, maybe a surviving spouse, and give them what, for me, is a word of hope. I know a lot of veterans who have been out there who've been struggling, trying to get above 50% of their rating or 60% of their rating. Trying to show that their service caused their condition, and it has not been universally applied across the board. Certain regions, we're going to talk about some specific things after the break, but I want you to give them a call and tell them to get on and listen to Real World, Real Talk on tonight. Before we get to the break, let's talk about what does it mean to have a presumptive condition for toxic exposure, because a lot of people have been talking around it. Some people have felt like our government has hid around it. There was certain things, certain stigmas attached to the Vietnam veterans, and then there were some stigmas attached later on to Gulf War veterans as well. Talk about that presumptive condition for toxic exposure.
Correct. So what that means on those presumptive conditions is if you were boots on the ground in country during any of these campaigns in any of these areas that the VA has identified, and you present medically with any of these health conditions, then you are eligible for that benefit. You still have to apply for the benefit. You have to go through the screening process. But those presumptive conditions are things that the VA has seen in multiple veterans over multiple years. And again, we go back to our World War I and World War II vets. There were things that they dealt with end of life that the VA is working now to address before it becomes a full-blown cancer, or before it becomes heart failure, before it becomes COPD, or whatever that long-term condition is. There's a couple of lists I dropped in the chat, va.gov. If you go to va.gov and look there, it has a laundry list of those presumptive conditions. It also has a laundry list of those areas that veterans have served in that are on the presumptive list. There's a number, 1-800-698-2411 to get additional information on the PACT Act. And again, va.gov, or you can just call the main number at the VA hospital and just let them know, hey, I heard about this toxic exposure. I heard about the VA PACT Act. I would like to be screened. There are also, Dr. Cofield, patient advocates at the VA. And again, this is new for me coming on board. If a veteran comes to the VA and their experience is not what they expected it to be, they can ask to speak with the patient advocate. And that patient advocate, again, will walk alongside that veteran to that clinic, to that doctor, to find out what's the best service that we can offer to that veteran. And again, I'll give the patient advocate hotline, 713-794-7884 is there. For our younger vets, we have a mobile app. We have QR codes that veterans can access. So there are multiple access points for veterans to reach out, to identify themselves as vets, to enroll, to go through the benefits process, and then enroll themselves in the hospital.
Give us that 800 number again,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Blackshear.
It's 800-698-2411.
And the 713-794 number?
713-794-7884.
So this whole idea of getting that toxic exposure screening, again, even if you know the veteran has served during that era, you're encouraging veterans not to wait to be contacted, but to take the initiative and reach out to the VA so they can help facilitate them getting their rating much quicker.
That is correct. There is an effort by the VA to reach out to veterans that served during that time. We're doing it both through official channels and unofficial channels, word of mouth. But again, for a veteran who knows that he has served during that time, who has some of these health challenges, now's the time to go ahead and schedule and or enroll.
You're listening to Real World, Real Talk on your community station, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial in Houston and KTSUradio.com. We're going to be back in just a moment. We're going to talk about burn pit and other toxic exposure conditions that are now presumptive. We're going to go down some of the lists specifically. And if you hear something that is knocking on your door, something that's in your neighborhood, we want to encourage you to get that screening, to reapply for that rating. The numbers again, 1-800-698-2411, 1-800-698-2411, or the hotline locally, 713-794-7884. That's 713-794-7884. For those of you who may be listening, listen, you have a grandparent or an older parent, man, they might need you at this point, just like they used to fight for you when you were young. You
Yes.
might need to fight for them now that they are up in age. You might need to make those phone calls, but it's definitely a fight that you want to get into. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in just a moment with Mr. Cornelius Bennett on your community station, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial. Welcome back to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more. KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial in the Houston metropolitan area, and KTSUradio.com. I have with me in the studio Mr. Cornelius Blackshear, and I want to say to all of our veterans on this Memorial Day weekend, man, we remember and we want to thank those who have given their lives, but we also want to today remember those who are still alive and the game-changing legislation that has come down with the PACT Act. So, Mr. Blackshear, let's talk about people who are now eligible for services and support. I know for many veterans, I'm not a veteran, but my father was, and I remember hearing stories and even in our interviews over the years of the challenges that people had to get their ratings to a level where they could access more services. And that rating was dependent upon where they fought, how long they served, and some wars, quite honestly, and some conflicts were not rated as highly as other ones.
Correct.
And so people who, even though they put their lives on the line, just like other veterans, did not get those ratings. One of the areas that the PACT Act is speaking to are burn pit and toxic exposure conditions that are now presumptive. More than 20 burn pit and other toxic exposures have been added based on the PACT Act. These presumptive conditions expand benefits for Gulf War era and post 9/11 veterans. Going back, it also expands opportunities for Vietnam veterans, Korean War veterans, World War II veterans, World War I veterans, if they're still alive, or they have a surviving spouse, to be able to access care and the like. It's amazing as I'm looking at this list, and I'm just going to go through the list for somebody who is listening. Brain cancer, glioblastoma, respiratory cancer of any type, anything breathing related, gastrointestinal cancer of any type, head cancer of any type, lymphoma of any type, lymphatic cancer of any type, neck cancer, pancreatic cancer, reproductive cancer of any type, kidney cancer, melanoma. We're talking about skin issues. They also consider illnesses as presumptive conditions such as asthma that was diagnosed after the service, chronic rhinitis, chronic sinusitis, constrictive bronchiolitis. I think I pronounced that right, hopefully. Emphysema, lung disease, pulmonary fibrosis, sarcoidosis, chronic bronchitis, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Man, I mean, the list just goes on and on. I think what's amazing for me, and you being a veteran, you can speak to this much better than I can. It's just amazing that it's taken so long for this to come to pass and for our country to acknowledge the connection between the service that people gave and their underlying health issues that came following that service. And one of the things you said during the break that I want our listening audience to be aware of is this is a game changer for these veterans, but it's also a game changer for those who were in the Air Force and in the Navy, because some of these chronic conditions, you're saying it's not only those who are on the ground, but it also covers those who were in that airspace and those who were on ships who may not have ever touched the ground, which was something that didn't happen before. How did they come to that conclusion to make those shifts and changes?
So I think the VA has seen over the years that veterans, whether they be Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Coast Guard, we often leave the Coast Guard out, that were in these areas are part of these campaigns, are displaying some of the same health challenges once they come back from those combat zones or once they come back from that tour of duty. So I think when you look at it, it has the airspace above all of these locations. And then again, when you talk about the locations, the airspace, because anyone that served in any of those areas on any given day, you look at the toxic toxic, you look at the radiation, you look at the chemical, you look at those day-to-day tasks that veterans had to do. All of those are conditions that you can find in this PACT Act legislation. So again, I'm very proud as a veteran to be a part of this. No, this is a true thank you for your service moment for me. And again, I'm just glad to be a part of the VA as we move into this new phase of re-engaging our veterans, getting them enrolled. And again, you talk about the compensation piece. We can talk about the help, but the compensation piece as well. For those veterans that are living on fixed incomes, that are maybe our elders in the community, and medication is an issue, or you're thinking about purchasing food or even gas today, to be able to get that compensation that comes in for life for most of those veterans, that takes them from being to the point where I have to make a decision of do I eat or do I buy medication. So this PACT Act is life changing for a lot of those veterans and their family members.
Mr. Blackshear, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I've had people who listen to this show who have contacted me off air and thanked me, for example, for our food pantry,
Yes.
saying, if it wasn't for the food pantry, there were weeks that they would not eat. And they're veterans, and they're telling me, about their service. And I'm going, and this is crazy, in this country, the richest country in the world,
Yes.
that men and women who put their lives on their line, that their families have to be dependent upon a food pantry to eat. And they could only get, I think this gentleman could only get a 40 or 50% rating at the time. And so he was denied. When you talk about, as you said, not just treatment, which of course is life-changing,
Yes.
but compensation is a game changer on a whole nother level. If a veteran served in any of these locations and time periods, the VA has determined they had exposure to burn pits or other toxins. Let me give you some of these places. On or after September the 11th, 2001, Afghanistan, Djibouti, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Uzbekistan, Yemen, the airspace above any of these locations. On or after August the 2nd, 1990, in any of these locations: Bahrain, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and the airspace above any of these locations. Are veterans eligible for free VA healthcare as a post 9/11 combat veteran?
That is correct. So our role with the military to VA program is those veterans that are transitioning off of active duty, they are eligible for immediate enrollment into the Michael E. DeBakey VA Medical Center. And that's a VA anywhere, though, nationally. Once we enroll them, we connect them with, again, within our clinic or within the VA hospital, to their primary care physician. And I want to take a moment real quick and give our doctors and nurses and clinicians and all those folks a shout out, because again, not only am I a veteran working at the VA, I also receive my care from the VA. And I'll tell any veteran that's had a bad experience over the years, come back and pay a visit. Let's walk back through that process. But for those veterans that are coming in, the combat veterans, we enroll them in the VA. They're eligible for up to 5 years of health care at no cost. They're eligible for up to 5 years of dental care at no cost. They are eligible for up to 5 years of vision. My glasses that I have on now, they're VA issued. So you go in and you get your screening, you go and get your dental work done, you meet with the clinic, and then again, the medical information that's kept and stored at the VA as you're receiving treatment, you can also take that information and use that to apply for compensation over at the Veteran Benefits Administration. I do want to mention that for those mental health and PTSD, we talk about that a lot. We also have our vet center are here in the Houston area. So a veteran, again, that served on any of these campaigns can go to the vet center and receive counseling and case management, not only for the veteran, but for the spouse. They also do counseling for the children. And I do believe there's also a couples therapy that's included in that. Again, those eligibility requirements, va.gov, look up the vet center, give them a call, and again, see what benefits that the vets are eligible for.
But the other thing I think is important for people who may be just tuning in, that Vietnam and Cold War era veterans are eligible at a whole nother level now.
That's correct.
And I think, when we listen to Vietnam veterans talk, not just about what they had to deal with and see in the conflict, but when they came back to this country and how they were viewed and how they were received. And many of them were not revered. Many of them were not honored when they came back, even though they simply did what they were asked to do by their country. Did not receive the ratings, did not receive the support, did not receive the honor. I can go so far as to say maybe the love that they felt like they should have gotten from our country. I thought something was really interesting around the new Agent Orange presumptive conditions that the VA has added. Monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance, but also high blood pressure. And I know you're not a medical doctor. I'm just interested because that when you talk about cancers and you talk about all of the other things that we quote unquote would view as very serious health conditions, but something as common as high blood pressure is now on the list as a presumptive condition that you have served. Can you just speak to that as a veteran yourself, as you just think about that being on the list as well?
Yeah, so again, when you serve in country, whether it's combat or non-combat, there are different elemental issues that you'll come up against. There are chemical experience that you have putting your gas mask on and being gassed. There are different injections and shots and things that we'll take. There are supplements that we'll take, again, to combat some of the other health challenges that may come along while we are in country per se. All of those things, I think, over the years have been identified by, I want to say, the legislature and the VA, that our veterans are beginning to experience that at a higher rate than their peer set. So when you look at folks that have never served in the military versus veterans that have served and had combat time and had all of these other health challenges and presumptive conditions, those things are causing issues. They're causing end of life challenges for veterans. So again, I'm glad that the VA has looked at those conditions. Our research team is another team of the VA that doesn't get a lot of light shine on it. But a lot of these conditions, a lot of these screenings, a lot of these policies that are being made, it's because the VA has done research on some of these health conditions and challenges that veterans are facing. So again, when you look at that, the Vietnam era veterans, and we go to our American Legions and VFWs all the time, they, in my opinion, are the most difficult group to engage, not just with the VA, but veteran stuff in general, whether it be camaraderie, family, or whatever. But you stated it, they were not treated well. And in fact, some of them were completely disrespected. They didn't receive the compensation that they probably thought they should have earned. But our mission, again, is still to engage, to educate, to enroll, and then to empower. So if we take this, just as we're having this conversation now, to the masses, we're asking our faith-based leaders, we're asking the colleges and universities, we're even asking employers that have veterans that are on their staff, even if they may not have all of the health challenges today, because some of these presumptive conditions may occur later in life, go ahead and enroll, be screened, and be tested to see if these conditions even exist.
So the Vietnam Agent Orange presumptive locations that have been added, 5 new locations have been added. I'm going down the list now and I'm reading this. Any U.S. or Royal Thai military base in Thailand from January of 1962 through June of 1976. Laos,
Mhm.
Cambodia, the Mimat or Krek Kampong Cham province from
Yes.
1969, April 16th through April the 30th, 1969, Guam or American Samoa, or in the territorial waters off of Guam or American Samoa from 1962 to 1980, Johnston Atoll, or on a ship that called at Johnston Atoll from January 1972 through September 1977. So those areas previously were not included. Now they are included. How many veterans do you anticipate with the expansion of services that are eligible now through the PACT Act? How many more veterans do you think will be eligible to be served? How many will benefit from both the health as well as compensation packages that are being made available? Is there any number that you all have looked at?
I know, again, I shared earlier that since August of 2022, 52,427 PACT Act claims have been filed here in the state of Texas. I know the VA's goal and mission, and they've made a very clear, as soon as this legislation passed, we began to host PACT Act events. And at those events, we weren't just talking about the PACT Act, we were actually screening and enrolling. So I would like to believe, as a veteran myself, that every veteran in the state of Texas that is eligible for this benefit at some point in time will at least go and enroll, be screened, and apply for compensation.
New radiation presumptive locations that have been added include cleanup of Air Force B-52 bombers carrying nuclear weapons off the coast of Spain and other areas, including Greenland from 1967 or 66, I should say, through 1968. How do veterans file a disability claim for a new presumptive condition? So if they're listening now and they're saying, wow, okay, I didn't know that, or man, I'm glad to hear that somebody's finally, recognizing how I was adversely impacted by my service to the country. How do they file a disability claim, or their family member file a disability claim for a new presumptive condition?
Yes, sir. So again, for all access to any VA benefits, va.gov, there's a search box at the top. Within that search box, you want to type in file a disability claim. You will go to that link. It allows you to do one of two things. You can either schedule an in-person appointment or an online appointment with one of the Veterans Benefit Administration staff. They will work with you through that claim, and then from the date that your claim is filed, you have up to 1 year to present evidence. So that's medical evidence. That's your DD-214 that says that you served in these areas. That's buddy statements from peers that maybe served alongside of you. That's statements from your family members that said before he went to the VA, he was healthy or this or that. And since he's come back, these conditions have begun to cause quality of life issues. So all of those things will be done. And also at the Veterans Administration, there are other entities and agencies that will help veterans file their claims. So the Texas Veterans Commission is one of those. Disabled American Veterans is another. Those groups are actually at the VA hospital. So when you meet with the VBA staff member, they can actually connect you directly to one of those representatives that will assist you in filling out the paperwork, filing the claim, pulling resources. I had a conversation with some veterans earlier today at an event, and they were asking, how do you get a copy of your DD-214? So there's a paper trail and a form to fill out, but there's also an electronic link. And then you can also go to the VA to get what's called a service letter. Most veteran service groups, whether they be for-profit, nonprofit, or the VA, they will honor those letters because that information is coming directly from the Department of Defense and the VA, that this person is a veteran, they have served, and they're requesting that DD-214. But you also want to request all other medical records, anything while you're on active duty, any medical records you may have done with a doctor here in the community. All of that information will be compiled, and that's how you file a claim. But again, the first step, va.gov, file a claim, VBA, schedule your appointment to meet with someone.
So they can file that claim right now while we're
They can
on,
do it today.
on
Yes,
the,
sir.
on the
Yes,
air.
sir.
They can go right on it and file that. And if they were denied their disability claim in the past, and now their condition is considered a presumptive condition, how would they go back? Would they have to file a new
Yes.
act, or would they do something to supplement an old act?
They
Or
they
old
will
file?
go They will go and pull their denial letter. The VA has that stuff on file, so it should not be difficult for them to track that information down and again and go back in and resubmit that claim. And again, remember we talked about earlier, if they had a 0 rating, that doesn't mean that the condition wasn't there. That means their presumptive and their health challenges did not meet the criteria for it at that time. But with these presumptives being there and these new health conditions being added, the veteran should go back in and file that claim again.
So if I'm a veteran and I have a pending claim, is there anything I need to do to change that or modify that pending claim that I have out there?
Yes, again, I would recommend they still go through and do the screening. Once they've done the screening, the doctor's going to tell them, yes, you meet the presumptive conditions for this ailment, and then to go ahead and file that claim. So again, even if you have something that's pending that's not on this list, you want to go ahead and file for the toxic exposure as well.
Yeah. What is the timeline to hear back on your application, and maybe the timeline in terms of when you start seeing actual benefits come from this, whether it's availability or accessibility to healthcare along with compensation?
Correct. So once a veteran files a compensation claim, again, they have up to a full year to submit evidence. Once they begin submitting evidence, as soon as the VA is able to gather all of that information, they will then send that information off to be verified and either to approve and or deny or postpone a claim depending on what the veteran has submitted. Those numbers fluctuate again as we're seeing more veterans that are coming in. The timeline between filing and being approved and filing and or seeing a compensation check or all that stuff is in place. I would still say about a year's timeline. But even in that, if you have those conditions that are presumptive, then you want to talk to your doctor about you're starting to receive treatment for those. So at least you're getting treatment while your claim is being processed through the Veterans Benefit Administration.
For those of you who just are tuning in, I'm Dr. DZ Cofield. You're listening to Real World, Real Talk, and we are celebrating Memorial Day by celebrating those veterans who are still alive. We certainly want to applaud and celebrate those who have given their lives, but we want to honor those and get information out to those of you who are veterans, those of you who may be survivors, those of you who may be beneficiaries of your having passed away veteran. So let's talk about dependency and those people who are survivors and what they may be eligible for. We talked earlier, but just in case somebody's just tuning in, when we talk about survivors being eligible for VA benefits, you talk about dependency, indemnity compensation, monthly payments. Some may be accrued benefits. But I think what's interesting for me is survivors who may be eligible include a surviving spouse, a dependent child, or a parent of a veteran who died from a service-connected disability. And you talk about survivors being able to go to va.gov. I'll be honest with you, as I was reading that, you know, I can see and thought about, of course, the veteran themselves and thought about their spouse. Didn't think about, though, a dependent child, and really didn't think about a parent whose child was a veteran who died in service or died after service of some of these presumptive conditions now. Why is this so important for people to get this information? Because I know you've been working hard, not just this past week, but you've been working hard since January to get this information out. Tell us why you're so passionate about this, Mr. Blackshear, and why you want to get this information out.
Well, again, I shared that I'm a veteran myself and have gone through the VA system, both through the hospital administration and through the compensation piece. The health benefits that myself and my family have obtained because of my receiving treatment through the VA, to include some surgeries and medical procedures, have been life-changing for me. I mean, I just point blank. So when you think about a veteran who does not have the same bandwidth or the skill set or the knowledge that some of us may have in the community, to be able to get them this information, not only around health, but the compensation. And then you think about those surviving spouses of veterans, whether they be male or female, that their spouse may have passed, and at the time they were not eligible for it. But to go back and the spouse to be able to benefit from their spouse's service, that again is unprecedented for me. So for those families that are listening in, whether your loved one is here, or whether they've gone on, I would still go and have their medical records screened to see if they're eligible for this benefit. There's another program that the VA has as a benefit called aid in attendance. So if a veteran is an older vet and there's someone in their household that is taking care of them because they're bedridden, or maybe they've lost some limbs, and you talk about diabetes and all the other conditions that go along with that, aid in attendance is the monthly compensation that that veteran can receive to support them staying in their house. There are VA housing modification grants that veterans can apply for. So let's say if you need to widen a door or increase a shower or build a ramp so that the veteran can get in and out of their home. There are vehicle modification programs where if the veteran needs a wheelchair lift or a ramp lift or a van that has this, that, and the other, that veterans can apply for through these programs. So, I mean, we've discussed some of the programs that the VA offers. I can sit here honestly and tell you, I learn something new every day because there are new programs, new possibilities. Uh, VA right now is opening up a whole health campaign, and this is hospital wide. So they don't want to just worry about that left knee. They want to know what's going on with the right knee as well. They're offering aquatic therapy. There are yogas. There are dietary, things that are being done. They're teaching veterans how to garden and how to grow their own food, and medication management. All those things. Again, once a veteran engages the VA, they're receiving their benefits, they're eligible for all of these services. The best part that I can say about the VA that I really enjoy, though, is for those veterans that are not eligible, that may not have met the combat time, or maybe didn't meet the time in service. They also work to connect them to community partners at the state level, at the county, or the local nonprofits that also assist them and help them with services. So it may be a financial need, it may be an educational need, it may be a counseling need. There are mentoring programs here in Houston that work with the children of veterans to make sure that when a family member is deployed, that child still has someone that's there besides the spouse that's left behind, that gets them out to a baseball game or a basketball game, or just to say hi and encourage them during their schooling. So again, the VA is a vast wealth of information. It's a vast wealth of resources and access, and that's why, again, we want to engage the veterans, we want to educate, we want to enroll, and we want to empower them. That's the mission.
Mr. Cornelius Blackshear of the Veterans Administration, thank you so much for being with us on today. Again, if you are a veteran, know a veteran, you are the dependent of a veteran, a surviving spouse of a veteran, a surviving parent of a veteran who has had their quality of life interrupted as a result of their service to our country or lost their life, there are new benefits that are available through the PACT Act. Go to va.gov, va.gov for more information. You can also call 800-698-2411. That's 800-698-2411, or a local hotline in Houston, 713-794-7684. That's 713-794-7884. Thank you so much, Mr. Blackshear, for being with us on today on Real World, Real Talk.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service, sir. The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And I'll be honest with you, man, our fight for our veterans is long overdue. These men and these women put their lives on the line. They are ready to respond at a moment's notice, following whoever is our chief and commanding officer in charge of our country, our president. And these men and women put their lives on the line. And it's only right that when they come back, we provide for them the care that they need, the support that they need, the compensation that they need to live comfortably. There are too many veterans who are in the Houston area, but also around the country, who still have tarps on their roofs because they can't afford to get their homes repaired. Their dietary needs are not being met. They're suffering many times in silence, or their survivors are suffering as a result of what has transpired. The PACT Act is a game changer. Go to va.gov for more information. Call 800-698-2411. Find that advocate who can walk with you through this process and get what you deserve. Stay tuned for Truth with V. Michael McKay, David Goldstein, Asia, and the crew on your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more. KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSU Radio, you already know, .com.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real World, Real Talk. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes every week. Follow us via social media using the @RWRTDZ username on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To submit any comments, questions, sponsor opportunities, or future show suggestions, visit us online at rwrtdz.com or via email at info@rwrtdz.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've been inspired to be the change you want to see in the world today. Until next time, be real, keep it real, and stay real.